Hi YouTube, I'm Tandy, the Pioneer Guy. I've recently made a Patreon where you can help me make content full-time. That Patreon link's going to be in the description below. If you like the video here on YouTube, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button at the end. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, I'm Tandy. Welcome to another edition of TimeShift. Today's show is going to be featuring Ross Merriam. Say hi, Ross.
Hi, Ross.
There it is. Love it. In today's episode, we're going to be watching not one, but two matches where you played Izzet Phoenix. Now, tell me a little bit about the history of Izzet Phoenix and like where the deck came from, you know, things like that.
So the genesis of it was, this was the year that Tannen and Brennan, you know, the people I teamed with the previous year for all the team events on the SCG tour, they just both had a lot of personal stuff going on. They had to step away from the team, so they weren't playing nearly as much Magic. But there was a team event announced in Las Vegas where Tannen used to live for many years, and at that point, Brennan was actually living in Denver, so he was pretty close. So they both thought, you know, this is one we can make it to. So we got the band back together for this one event in November. So I knew I wanted to put a lot of work in, make sure I had a really good deck. And I started testing in October, a month in advance. Didn't know exactly what I wanted to be playing. And I actually started by testing Amulet Titan. Was reasonably impressed with the deck, but wanted to move on to other things. Arclight Phoenix had just been printed. I had seen some people playing it. It seemed like a card that had a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And when I saw the Izzet lists that were floating around on Magic Online, they all had Thing in the Ice, which I thought was a well-positioned card. I had had some experience playing it earlier that year in Blue Moon as a sideboard card. And I knew it was very good against Dredge, which I thought would be popular because Creeping Chill had also just been printed. And it was good against the Noble Hierarch decks. So, there's a lot of humans and spirits around at the time.
Yeah, I remember.
So I was specifically attracted to the Izzet lists. And so I started testing those, and they looked really powerful, but I had some issues with them. One is that they were all very much built to be Phoenix decks.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily, they had a lot of discard outlets, whether it was Charter Course or Izzet Charm, usually Izzet Charm, in addition to the lootings. And their tertiary threat after Phoenix and Thing was Bedlam Reveler, which plays really generally okay with cantrips, but it doesn't play as well as you might think, because when you're playing cantrips, you never really empty your hand.
Right.
So the Reveler trigger usually doesn't generate actual card advantage.
That was actually my first experience seeing Izzet Phoenix. Like, I saw someone playing what you were saying. They had Thing in the Ice, Izzet Phoenix, and Bedlam Reveler as their three creatures, and they had they never had the ability to empty their hand because every single card replaced itself. And so, if I recall correctly, you were the first person to just do 4 Phoenix, 4 Thing in the Ice, and I don't even know if you had another threat at the time, right?
I did. We'll get to that.
Okay, sorry.
So I started playing this deck, and it looked quite good, but Reveler was awkward because everyone knew, they thought of it as a Phoenix deck. So everyone was bringing in their graveyard hate against you. Even things like Leyline of the Void, Rest in Peace, like really hard, powerful graveyard hate, and made Reveler awkward. I remember winning a game in the early leagues I was testing where I just was casting 8 mana Bedlam Revelers, which actually made me somewhat impressed because I thought, this deck that looks like it should get hosed by Graveyard Hate is winning through it, which is pretty impressive. So I went about making some changes to the deck, and I wanted to make it more Thing in the Ice centric. Thing in the Ice was the card that really impressed me a lot, and because of that, anytime I drew Manamorphose, the deck was busted.
Yeah.
And so I wanted more free spells primarily and more cheap spells.
And this
so
is when Jataxian Probe was still legal too, right?
No, we didn't have Probe.
Really? Oh, I thought we did. Oh, I'm stupid.
Probe got banned either earlier that year or earlier the previous year.
Okay.
So we're a year or 2 years after Probe. And so I started, adding a few more 1-mana cantrips. I didn't even get all the way up to 12. I was playing like 9 or 10. And I cut down a lot on Izzet Charms and 2-mana spells. Ended up playing like 2 Charta courses and an Izzet Charm the very first time I played the deck, which was still too many.
Yeah.
They were also playing things like Fiery Temper that I had a couple of that ended up being bad.
Yeah.
To take advantage of these added discard outlets. Turns out if you just have enough 1-mana cantrips, like Faithless Looting is enough. And it even took me a while to figure that out. But the big thing was I wanted more free spells, and I added a bunch of gut shots to the main, which were, again, very good against these Noble Hierarch decks. But in general, just necessary to make your Thing in the Ice turns and your Arclight Phoenix turns more explosive. And then it was finding an additional threat that you could add to the deck that wasn't graveyard focused, but still had synergy with the deck. And that's where Crackling Drake came in. So I ended up, playing Crackling Drake, and people were, misunderstood how the card worked. They thought if they exiled my graveyard, it was an 0/4. So I'd have people just taking lethal damage without realizing it. The best one was there's weird cards that occasionally exile things. Like if you have something under any sort of Oblivion Ring kind of effect, or a Tide Hollow Sculler, sometimes you could get people thinking the Crackling Drake was one fewer than in power than it was. So my 2 innovations to the deck were adding Crackling Drake and adding, Gut Shot to the main. And those are really both motivated off of realizing it was much more of a Thing in the Ice deck than it was an Arclight Phoenix deck. And we ended up, doing well. We made the top 8 of the team event in Vegas. Not to throw my teammates under the bus because they often carried me, but I did win my top 8 match and they lost theirs. So, maybe we could have gone a little bit further, but the deck was quite good. But there was a lot of people, because my list, wasn't been that great at the time. It did not look like the list that you saw 2 months later, or at least it was still about, I'd say it was probably about 5 cards off, maybe more, 5 to 10. So, we kept working on the deck, and for this tournament in Baltimore, which was a couple weeks after Vegas, because I think it was 3 weeks after, because I think there was a week with nothing. There was Thanksgiving weekend right after Vegas, and then this tournament, because this was first weekend of December. My birthday, which was the 5th, was that Monday.
And what is your mother's maiden name? Just kidding. All right, so this deck, I remember Izzet Phoenix fondly because I was doing a lot of commentary at the time, and you were just tearing it up. I remember you had a win and a top 8 or a top 4 like in back-to-back weekends, and then you were just crushing it basically for months on end.
Yeah, we top 8 of the team event. I had a pretty bad year this year, actually. And I was, probably like 20th on the leaderboard. And between the top 8 of the team open in Vegas, then winning this event, and then the following weekend was the Season 4 Invitational, which I top 16'd. I think I put up almost as many points in those 3 weekends as I did the rest of the year.
Wow.
So really had a strong close to it. As far as this tournament went, the major change to the deck that was made was adding a couple Monastery Swiftspears. I had 4 Crackling Drake in Vegas, which was too many. Even the 3 I have here is too many. And I had 2 Swiftspears. I was a little bit worried about like Tron and combo decks, so I wanted a card that could put them under significant pressure. And Swiftspear in this deck ended up actually like not being that bad. It's not great because it's just a card that gets 1-for-1 a lot, and you don't want too many of those as far as your threats go. And one of the things I like about Drake is that cantrips. But it was good in certain spots. You'll see it, especially in this quarterfinal match. Actually, in the finals too. And even if there's one game of my top 4 match that's on camera too, and it's good in that game.
I remember
so
that match is like 10 minutes long on camera, so we might watch that one too, just for continuity's sake.
It was only game 3 because we were the backup match for that round.
Yeah, I can't have Ross on camera all 3 rounds of top 8. That'd be a shamakery.
They did do that when I almost went back to back in Providence in 2014. I was on camera all 3 of those. So. But yeah, Swiftspear is the main addition here. The deck got a little bit leaner. I'm playing 10 cantrips, 1-mana cantrips instead of 9. We've cut all the poopy, fiery tempers. I think I had a lightning axe in the Vegas list. I still have 1 here. So the list is just getting marginally better each time. And then like a month later, when other people started putting work into it and playing it in GPs and things, you saw the deck really take shape. So this is probably 80% of the way there, this list that I'm playing, but fewer people than I anticipated, adopted the deck. I think I went 8-1 on day one of this event, only losing the mirror, and then oh no, I lost to the shadow guy on day one too. Nelson, I think his name was. It was and then ended up losing once to Pakula on camera playing humans, and swept through the rest of the event because I X3 the Swiss. So, but this was all these matches in the top 8 are really sweet. One of my favorite matches from the Swiss, which wasn't on camera, was against Martyr Proc. Seems like a pretty bad matchup because they just stall out the game and deck you.
Yeah, and they have a bunch of Path Exiles and stuff too, so they feels like they would just exile all your Phoenixes, right?
Yeah, I basically just brought in all of my ways to protect threats and tried to ride Crackling Drake, and it worked. Like, I had some really big Crackling Drakes.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. I mean, Martyr gains, 15 life, and then you're like, okay, attack for 18.
I also had the one Ral Izzet Viceroy in the sideboard that could dominate games.
Yeah.
That one ended up getting added because I wanted a planeswalker that could also answer big angels because I was worried about those out of the control decks and
like Baneslayer or Lyra
for this quarterfinal match. But yeah, I like those. But not to give too hard of a spoiler alert here, but it worked out pretty well.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start the match here. We're going to be watching Ross play against Brad Nelson in the quarterfinals, and then we'll be watching the finals as well. We're going to have it on mute. Keep going. Go ahead.
Thing about this match, I've been talking with BBD a lot this week, and BBD and Brad have been playing Jeskai a lot in Modern around this time, and I had BBD almost convinced to play Phoenix, and then I saw him at the tournament, and he was playing Jeskai like Brad, and he said that the reason he did that is because he thought the Jeskai deck was favored against Phoenix. I think the control matchup for Phoenix was very good. Azorius was a much better matchup than Jeskai. Azorius was kind of a buy. But even Jeskai, they just have a bunch of like red removal. Their game plan is really just run you out of threats. But if you play carefully, that's kind of hard to do. And but the games are intricate and difficult. I actually beat Brad in the Swiss of this event in a pretty close 3-game set. I kind of ran away with game 3, but the first 2 games were pretty close, and these games also quite close.
Yeah. All right, so Brad Nelson's on Jeskai control. He's going to lead with Celestial Colonnade. You got a Serum Visions to start. So in your mind in this matchup, did you think Jeskai control was a buy, or were you afraid to play against Brad? And had you played against him earlier in the tournament?
Yeah, like I said, we had played in the Swiss. I had won the matchup. I think the Jeskai matchup is good for me, but I know, anytime you play against a control deck, the quality of your opponent matters a whole lot.
Right.
And so I know, playing Brad on Jeskai control is a lot different than playing, an average Jeskai control opponent in a tournament. So
I also have to imagine that playing him a second time is probably also kind of scary because things that he might not have known in the first match because your deck's kind of new, he actually has learned and maybe adapted his sideboard strategy or maybe mulligan more aggressively.
And this is a very good start from Brad. What you're mainly concerned about in this matchup is applying very even, constant pressure. So you're never overextended and you keep coming back for more and more, but you never give the opponent too much of a window to start generating card advantage.
Right.
And this early search for Azcanta is a way for Brad to get something underneath my pressure because I usually don't start really applying pressure till about turn 3. And filter his draws early, make sure he makes his land drops, and then have that source of card advantage pop up right when he needs it to start pulling ahead. So Searcher's Canto is a really important card, or was a really important card in this matchup. And so I'm feeling a little bit scared here early on in game 1.
So Brad plays Searcher's Canto, actually bends a Path to Exile with it. That's kind of interesting considering Path is one of the stronger cards. You have to imagine maybe he's missing land drops and just looking for lands, right?
Either missing land drops or has Snapcaster Mage.
Oh, yeah, good call.
It's definitely one of those two things.
One thing
you notice he doesn't have any red mana. That's also a sign that he's low on lands.
That's
so
true.
I'm leaning that at this point.
One thing that's also kind of interesting is that before, was it Ikoria? Or not Ikoria, Ixalan. Before Ixalan, Opt wasn't in Modern. And Opt was a relatively new addition to Modern when you started playing in this deck, if I recall correctly, right?
So I had been playing Opt in Blue Moon. and I'm just not sure how much time between these
Sure,
two
sure.
passed. I think that was the year before this, but it's still relatively recent. Like I think Opt-in Modern is about a year old at this point.
All right, so Faithless Looting from Ross here, looking to pitch a Phoenix. I don't think that that's a Phoenix in the yard, but maybe it is. I can't tell. Let me zoom in here. Oh, it is.
Sure.
Okay, so you do have one Arclight Phoenix. So I have you on a smaller screen, and then I'm looking here, right? And this is the small screen, but the big screen's over here. So sorry about that. All right, so you discard a Phoenix and Izzet Charm. Looks like you're going to be casting a second Faithless Looting. This is your third spell for the turn, and this is where the deck really starts to juice up.
And like a third turn for this deck is really when things happen. You can start transforming Thing in the Ice on turn 3 pretty easily if you have it on turn 2. Returning Arclight Phoenixes very easily. So you usually get to do something good on turn 3. One of the big things also in this matchup is you really don't want to discard extra threats and relevant cards to your Faithless Looting set often, because the games are going to go long and you're going to cast a lot of Faithless Lootings every game, and you're going to need really all of your resources over the course of it. So you want to be very judicious in your lootings. The fact that I played 2 of them there is a sign that I really don't have other 1-mana spells in my hand.
Yeah. No, you also you really want to save specifically Faithless Looting for when you have a Phoenix in hand. Like if you're discarding, Lightning Bolts and Izzet Charms, it's usually a sign of desperation almost. Like when you in Legacy, when you turn 1 Brainstorm because you're light on land drops instead of waiting later on to get maximum value.
There's another Phoenix I just drew. I've got Lootings in the yard. You basically only want to be discarding extra lands and Phoenixes to Lootings if you can help it. Obviously, super early in the game, that usually doesn't happen, but as the game goes on, it'll be more important.
Yeah, so Brad keeps the top card, plays Sulphur Falls after missing a land drop, so that was the draw for the turn more than likely. You untap with Thing in the Eyes. It's pretty scary. It deals a lot of damage, but what really needs to happen for Brad is he's going to have to answer not only this Thing in the Ice, but also the Arclight Phoenix in your hand, and you might be able to overwhelm him because this is a very 1-for-1 heavy removal deck from the Jeskai control, but most of the removal is the burn spells like Lightning Bolt and Lightning Helix with only a scant few Path to Exiles.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to try to keep the pressure on so that they never feel comfortable to start just drawing a bunch of cards, with whatever it is that they have, because they have a few other ways to gain card advantage. It's usually against creature decks, Supreme Verdict, and because of Arclight Phoenix, you're not as vulnerable to Verdict, and you'll see me really, throughout this match, go out of my way to not put another threat on the battlefield that can easily get verdicted, so you don't want to have 2 of them out at the same time.
Right.
It's 1 Thing in the Ice out, 1 Swiftspear, 1 Crackling Drake, and no others, unless I really get the sense that there's no verdict or I can try to push for lethal. There are some isolated cases where you want to do stuff like that, but in general, you want to avoid it.
Yeah, this is discounting Arclight Phoenix though because it has the recursion clause, right? You just want to get those in play as quickly as possible. If they get Path, they get Path, but if they're casting Verdict to kill Phoenix, that's usually a dub.
And the really cool thing about this deck, and one of the underrated reasons that it was so good, is because Arclight Phoenix and Thing in the Ice are, both at the time they were threats that you really needed to path. So you just overloaded people's paths a lot, even if they had them. And if they didn't, if they were more of a bolt or a fatal push deck, then yeah, they could usually deal with Thing in the Ice, but they really couldn't deal with Phoenix. And so you saw people needing to bring in weak graveyard hate, and then you could just kind of overwhelm them with card advantage and your low land counts, and use Faithless Looting to discard extra lands and make sure you keep the gas flowing.
All right, so here I feel like you were really wanting to have a free spell to transform Thing in the Ice, or did you have a free spell and you chose not to transform Thing in the Ice?
So I'm not sure exactly, what is the case here, but sometimes you do like having Thing on 1 with a Phoenix, especially against a Path deck, because then you can use a spell to protect your Phoenix from those exile effects.
Yeah, you miss out on a little bit of damage, but protecting those Phoenix helps you maybe win the long game.
Yeah. If Brad was tapped out there, then sure, and I had the free spell, you just go and get them into get damage in, make them deal with your threats, and you can get them into burn range pretty quickly, because that's the other part of this matchup, especially in game 1. Like you go through most of your deck, you find your bolts, so that that's why their helixes are sometimes important, and other sources of life gain, because if they just take a little damage from their lands, from Phoenix hits, maybe a Swiftspear attack here or there, maybe you're lucky and get a thing hit in, then it's pretty easy to get them into burn range over the course of a very long game where you're probably going to find 3 lightning bolts and a gut shot.
That's one of the underrated parts of Phoenix, I think, is because you were playing Bolt, Gut Shot, and sometimes other burn spells, like, you only needed to do 9, 11, 12 damage with your Phoenixes and things in the ice. Like, you could very easily just find your lightning bolts with all your card draw closer to the end of the game and finish off an opponent who was able to deal with all your threats.
Yeah. And it was a very integral part of the shadow matchup, actually, where you would just try not to attack them early, make them deal themselves the usually 11 damage. They wanted to get to 9 so that their shadows weren't boltable, and you could do that, and then set up a turn where you return 2 Phoenixes and bolt them once or twice and just kill them from that 9.
So if I remember correctly,
nice.
Yeah, I agree. Drawing the card. I was saying, it's actually interesting watching Brad not have a counterspell for the Crackling Drake. He had to use the Cryptic command to bounce the thing in the ice because he didn't have a way to kill it. And because of that, this Jeskai deck was actually kind of light on counter magic. It had some number of Cryptic commands. Maybe had Logic Knot, but I don't even know if that many Logic Knots were around. Maybe had Mana Leak. I don't know how many Brad's playing necessarily. And
he has Logic Knot, not Mana Leak.
Sure. But the big deal is that he does not have a ton of counter magic, and so anything that has 4 toughness is going to dodge Helix and Lightning Bolt, or require 2 of those to get the job done, and that's just kind of a nightmare.
Also has Electrolyze that can combine in, but is mana inefficient. So looks like this is going to be Helix Bolt.
Yeah, but he's going to be able to transform Search for Escanta now. That gives him not only an extra mana, but maybe a card draw engine. And
notably here, I have the Lightning Axe in my hand, the one of. So sometimes in this matchup, they can leave up that Colonnade, and that can play defense against Arclight Phoenixes, but I'm not scared of that at all. I'm really hoping Brad goes for it.
Yeah.
It's a fun dance because you can bluff attack your Phoenixes into them pretty easily because they're going to come back, especially in the early part of the game. And if they really don't want to get blown out by that Lightning Axe, if you do have it, or even like Bolt plus Gut Shot would be pretty bad.
I think I see a Gut Shot in your hand, and when you were talking about that, I was like, man, I hope you attack, and I hope he blocks with Colonnade so you can Gut Shot it to death.
Looks like I have a Swiftspear in my hand.
Yep. And you still have that thing in the ice from earlier, too. So you're pretty flush on threads.
Yeah. And Thing in the Ice is actually kind of weak in this matchup because you have to put so much time into transforming it. And then they have, a bunch of answers. And you see me here again. Like, I've got this one Arclight Phoenix that's been plinking around. And it's always one additional thread on top of that. So Brad's Verdict is never very good, but I'm still applying constant, even pressure. Make sure that Brad doesn't have the opportunity to start leveraging this as Canta.
Right. The Escanta activations, like, if you don't put pressure on them, they will bury you. And so, like, I love your take of just always make them be interacting with you, because if they're interacting with you, they're not drawing a card.
And eventually, they'll make 3 extra land drops in you because you're an 18 land deck and they're a 24, 25 land deck.
Right.
And, or eventually they'll just have 3 card draw spells in their hand and they have to take a turn off and cast them. And that's the turn that you just pounce. Maybe you don't deal all the damage to them that turn, but you deal enough to get them into burn range.
All right, so it looks like we have 3 spells cast: Manamorphose, Opt, and Flashback Faithless Looting. And so now it's going to be looking to discard another Phoenix. I don't think you have one. I think this would be a little bit easier if you did. But you do have a land and a Lightning Axe, and I think you're thinking about playing the land, holding up the Lightning Axe to kill the Colonnade, or just discarding it and hoping that he blocks so you can Gut Shot and blow him out.
And I don't remember which one I do.
Well, you discarded Land Axe. That's fair. And I'm pretty sure this means you have a Gut Shot, right?
This is me really trying to make sure I don't flood. Staying on, 5-6 lands.
And Brad actually thinks maybe the coast is clear, but he knows the Gut Shot's in your deck, so maybe he's not going to fall for it. Maybe he's just going to activate his Kanta. Electrolyze on the bird. That's going to fog it for a turn, but that Monastery Swiftspear is attacking for 4 right now.
And the Phoenix, is just going to come back. So I've got the same amount of pressure probably next turn with just 3 spells plus Swiftspear.
Right.
And the bird coming back. I'm pretty far through my decks, and I've only seen 2 birds because that early one got pathed. And the one that's been attacking was the second one I produced. There's 2 more left in my deck.
So
this
Brad
does keep some pressure off Brad and let him activate the Azcanta.
Yeah, Brad also a very hyper aware player, knows that this matchup is about grinding, and he's already gone through 2 Path to Exiles, and he hasn't only dealt with one of the Arclight Phoenixes, and he knows that sooner rather than later you're probably going to find another one, and if he can't deal with the first one, he's never going to be able to deal with the second one.
See, Brad here, I think one of the things he's going to be looking at is how many bolts I'm through, and that's going to tell him how protective of his life total he has to be. I believe there's 2 bolts in my graveyard. So 2 left. So he definitely wants to stay above 6. Probably above 7, really, because there's some gut shots in my deck. Though, if you can find a Helix, that changes. Helix on the Swiftspear would be a pretty good play here after the untap. Yeah, he's already through a couple Helixes.
Yeah, Helix in general is pretty solid here because it can kind of counter one of those future lightning bolts, giving him that life buffer. And taking care of the Monastery Swiftspear here is actually kind of nice. He hasn't drawn a Snapcaster Mage yet, or just hasn't deployed one yet. Do you know if he was playing the full 4 in this build? I assume he was. Most of them were.
He was. That's one of the downsides of Azcanta. It can't find Snapcaster, so maybe you just put a couple on the bottom.
Yeah, fair.
You get a Cryptic Command here, and that's pretty important for the end game. We were talking about when I find that 3rd and 4th Phoenix, which is going to happen eventually. It's a Cryptic Command that really gets the Jeskai control deck through those last few turns before they can potentially just deck me or get it so that I can't actually cast 3 spells, because that will deck me, and then they can clear everything up with a Verdict maybe.
So another thing, the Jeskai decks were actually pretty great at just burning you out sometimes. Like once the games would go long enough, they would Azcanta or Sphinx's Rev or some other card advantage engine. Oh, there's another Phoenix. That's a good one. But they would use those Cryptic Commands and Snapcaster Cryptic Commands to kind of stall you out. Tap all your creatures, draw a card. Tap all your creatures, draw a card. And then they would go a flurry of burn to finish you off. And then sometimes a colonnade attack. And it was kind of crazy.
You see me here being a little cognizant of that, hard casting this gut shot for a red mana. I've got the mana to spare, keep my life total high, make sure I don't open myself up to a play like that.
Love it. Looks like Brad's here is reaching for Cryptic. He's going to go tap draw. And is looking for a Verdict, looking for some way to reset, maybe looking for Path or Snapcaster Mage to deal with one of the birds. And he uses the mana for Search for Azcanta. Looked like he was thinking about playing a spell from hand, but thought better of it.
I think he has some Hieroglyphic Illuminations, and Illumination is a card that can find him a Snapcaster Mage, whereas Canta isn't.
I love Hieroglyphic Illumination. I don't know how else to say it. I was going to say something cheeky about how when it first came out, I was like, this card's better than Opt, but like, I don't know. I love that card so much, and it makes me giddy that it actually saw play in Modern. It's such a weird card.
Definitely a cool card. One of the better, I think, they've printed a lot of those 4 mana draw 2 with upside variants, Inspiration Plus kind of cards, and that's among my favorites of them. So now we know Brad has a Logic Knot. He just used the Cryptic, so that I think that's all I know from his hand. Here, it's just going to be about you really trying to force through the last few points. I've got Brad pretty low. I'm not under pressure myself, but I'm starting to run low. I think on just spells. I think my hand is pretty threat heavy at this point. It's awkward because I don't really want to extend more threats.
All right, so
happy to see this Electrolyze.
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's this weird point in games with Phoenix where you have to decide if you want to start playing stuff before you attack or not, or if you have enough pressure in play, you want to attack, force your opponent to interact, and then you go for the chain on the next turn. If you're just spinning your wheels and not bringing back Phoenix, I think that's usually kind of like a waste of mana, waste of resources. And so, but like eventually, like you said, there's a chance that you just get decked this game. So
That's the point where I'm at, where I need to be a little more conservative. I have an attack for 7 here. When Brad's at 8, any instant makes it lethal. So there's no real point in me doing stuff pre-combat.
that's one of my mantras is just make them have it. And then this is definitely a spot where like, oh, I'm attacking you for lethal. You have to do something first.
Now it's a little awkward because I know Brad has a Logic Knot. So this is me trying to bait a Logic Knot, this thing in the ice, because I have a Crackling Drake in my hand.
Oh,
that I'd much rather resolve.
Yeah, if he does counter the thing in the ice, though, that probably means he doesn't have a Supreme Verdict, though. But if he lets it resolve, he probably does, right? And then if you go for Crackling Drake, maybe he even lets it resolve. If he lets the thing resolve, you don't even play the Drake, right?
I'll just start playing this, but I might like flashback the last looting. That's what I do.
Yeah. And now Brad is actually considering Logic Knotting, but thinks better of it. And this is just about mana efficiency. You're not going down on resources. The looting is breaking even from the graveyard. And you're pushing the thing in the ice so that it's a little easier to transform next turn.
The Izzet Charm and Charter Course here are both gone, so I have no more discard outlets. And I discard 2 threats.
You have a Lightning Axe in hand.
Oh, did I have 2 Lightning Axes in my deck? I thought I only had 1. Discarded 1 to a previous looting.
I remember seeing you discard it, and I'm pretty sure there's 1 in your hand. And you kept the mountain off the Faithless Looting, and I'm pretty sure you have the Lightning Axe to make sure you don't get burned out by this Celestial Colonnade. Brad asking for a deck count. It's going to be probably like 24, be my guess. Maybe 22.
I think it's something about that.
So at what point does Brad start main phasing the Escanta looking for Supreme Verdict? Or is that never going to be a scenario here? Is that just like too mana inefficient?
It could be. Depends on what kind of pressure I want to apply. I've shown him 2 threats here. That's as good as his verdict is going to get. But if it's awkward for him to try to tap out for something like that. That's 8 mana he's committing, and I have 2 Phoenixes in the yard.
Yeah.
Don't think he can do that with the Phoenixes in the yard.
I think at this point he's kind of bottlenecked into having to cast Cryptic Command just over and over again, because it's going to be pretty easy to bring back both Phoenixes, transform thing in the ice, recast the Swiftspear, and then just like go for like a lethal attack. And so this is the point where against Jeskai Control where it's really the tester, where do you have Cryptic Command every turn for the rest of the game? And if you do, you're probably going to beat me, but if you don't, you're dead like now.
Yeah. And 2 Cryptics are gone, but I haven't seen a single Snapcaster. There was another looting. Something else must have gotten exiled.
Arclight Phoenix did with the Path to Exile.
Oh yeah, with the Path. Yep.
I actually thought that too. That's funny. Not a whole lot of
the last looting.
Yeah. Not a whole lot of straight red cards in the deck. Just looting, Bolt, Phoenix, and then most of the other ones are. I guess there's a few more. A couple Lightning Axe, couple gut shots.
Manamorphose is a red card in the deck.
I lied. It's base
thing
red.
Hitting the bin. At this point, thing in the ice is not particularly good. It's really a matter of how many more Phoenix triggers do I have.
Right. I think
not just cards in deck, but also just spells left in deck.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I played a lot of Izzet Phoenix in Pioneer and in Standard. Not a ton in Modern. I don't know why. I think I was doing a lot of commentary during that time instead of actually playing the events. But my experience with
Lightning
Phoenix...
Helix actually went upstairs, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Brad really cognizant of this potential burn plan.
Goes
does
for
that first.
Yeah, because if you just go triple bolt, he dies, right? In response to the Helix, or in response to the Cryptic, maybe, or something. I don't know. His sequencing makes some sense if you break it down individually, but he's playing around.
If I do something weird in response, he might do something different with his Cryptic.
Right. He might go counter your last bolt and then tap your creatures or whatever, right?
Yeah.
All right, so Cryptic from Brad. Now he's going to be in the Cryptic Hardlock, but he has a Scanta, so it's not impossible. This is very reminiscent of the like Wilderness Reclamation Nexus of Fate draws, where like you have to find Nexus every turn for like 5 straight turns to win, and sometimes you just do it because you just have enough raw card advantage and raw resources with your mana. And Brad has a ton of mana now, ton of cards.
Here he casts Illumination instead of activating his Scanta because he needs to find more Cryptic commands, and he's got more Snapcasters than actual commands left in his deck.
Right.
And so 2 cards to a 6-outer is better than 4 cards to a 2-outer.
Also, I don't think just hitting more mana is that bad for Brad either, because that'll just allow him to draw more cards over the course of the game if he's able to actually stabilize.
We saw him miss his 4th land drop in this game. I don't think he's missed one since.
Right.
So that's been very important.
All right, 5 mana here from Brad. What's the play?
Field of Ruin might be a Stone Rain. There's a 3rd basic island in my deck, but it might be in the graveyard.
Well, Brad is tapping 5 here. I don't think Teferi, Hero of Dominaria existed yet, right? So this, or maybe it did.
It definitely did.
Okay. I was thinking maybe he was going to be activating Celestial Colonnade, but Teferi makes a bit more sense. Wow, minus on the Thing in the Ice? That means that he might be in some trouble.
That is a sign of weakness from him, and I'm going to pounce.
Yeah. Time to get to work. Because if he had another Cryptic command, he would just tick up Cryptic, snap Cryptic, right? Like that has to be the thought process here.
Yeah. He's even putting more cards on my deck. He's making it harder to deck me.
I love the gut shot, so you don't have to send one of the Phoenixes at the Teferi. Love it.
Probably had enough mana that I didn't need to do that immediately. I could have potentially, had 1 point to put that at 9. Wow. Not a very aggressive turn for me.
Yeah, I expected you to play the Swiftspear here. I expected you to play the Swiftspear, though. That way you could threaten lethal. But maybe you have lethal anyway. It's fine. Maybe not. I don't know. Wow, that's a pretty good juke from Brad. He actually has the Colonnade activation plus a path. Now, is there any consideration, if the island's in your deck, is there any consideration to leaving it in the deck so that you have 1 extra card for your Thought Scours and such?
That is a consideration, but I knew it wasn't there. I just wanted to shuffle that thing that I know is now 2 from the top.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that in a random spot because it's not a very good draw.
Now, this Crackling Drake's going to come down this turn, right? And then Brad's going to have to make a big decision. You have, 2 Phoenixes still left in... No, you have 2 in exile, 1 in play. So you have 1 Phoenix left in your deck. You have a Thought Scour in hand, a Swiftspear in hand. I think this is going to be really hard for Brad to come back from this, right?
He's still got a good number of cards in hand, but we're figuring his hand is not that good.
Yeah, I mean, he's played a land. He's played like a land and spell every turn, though. I think he's only got 2 cards in hand.
I haven't counted. I'm pretty sure this Crackling Drake is lethal.
Oh yeah, I figured. Even if Brad has a Rest in Peace, it's lethal.
I haven't watched this match in a while, but I believe this count is 23.
That's pretty big. I'm sure I could turn on the volume for Cedric and Patrick and get a standard count. I'm sure, but it's irrelevant. It's big enough, as they say. Still no verdict from Brad. I expected that pretty early here, but he just hasn't had one the whole game. He might main phase the Escanta now digging.
I think if he had a verdict, we would have seen one a few turns ago. This is me counting.
How big is it? There's no Swords of Plowshares in this format, so it's here it
also,
comes.
I think my life total at this point is irrelevant.
21, pretty good. All right, we see the activation here. Brad looking for a verdict. Whiffs, hits all lands and Snapcasters. I wonder if he put like 2 Snapcasters to the bottom there. That's brutal. This might just be game. Hard fought battle from Brad, but trying to beat these Phoenixes with traditional spot removal is just impossible.
He comes pretty close here, and I think he had some weak draws towards the end. Never found a Snapcaster Mage. So there's definitely some encouraging signs from Brad, even though it looks like this game is slipping away.
Yep. And he goes for another minus on Teferi. Again, a very weak move in a spot where you have another creature on the battlefield. And he still knows you have Swiftspear in hand. So I think this is the spot where you could pretty easily just kill him from 7 with Swiftspear and a couple spells.
And we talked about how that you don't want to give them a spot to land a source of card advantage and start running away with the game. And if you do succeed in keeping the pressure on and making them interact, you leave them with these card advantage cards in their hand at the end, and that's what's happened. I mean, like Brad had a couple Teferis that is a card that you want to draw in this deck eventually, but he never had a good spot to play one. And now, towards the end of the game, when he needs even more interaction, he's stuck with these extra sources of card advantage that he never got a chance to leverage effectively.
Yeah, what you really want to do with Teferi is be able to play it, draw a card, and untap 2 lands, and have 4 untapped so that you can play Cryptic Command. And I guess he actually just kind of drew the Teferis in spots after he'd burned the Cryptic Commands, and so he was never able to kind of leverage that Planeswalker's card advantage engine. It's also particularly strong with a transformed Search for Ascanta because you can just like untap that and get multiple cards out of it, but it's kind of hard to do when you're getting pounded by Phoenixes over and over.
I Serum Visions first because I have another cantrip, so I want to be able to scry a bunch through my deck and then find something else that I need. I have the second Swiftspear here.
That's a heater.
But I found off the Serum Visions random card, which is quite good. But I think I have like 10, 12 cards in my deck at this point. So, and I've probably seen a few of them that are in my deck at other points, but just scried them to the bottom and saw them again. So not altogether, unlikely that I find both Swiftspears by this point in the game.
All right, Brad packs it in, 2 Swiftspears with a couple spells, and that relentless Arclight Phoenix just really putting a hurting on Brad. We're going to take a look at the sideboards here. Let me fix it so chat can see the whole sideboard. Give me just a sec. All right,
Jarvis, I am in my house. This is my bedroom that you're seeing on camera here. If you look subtly in my background over my left shoulder,
you can't see it anymore. I turned off your camera so we can see the sideboard. I'm sorry.
When it comes back, you'll be able to see a piece of my the blown up token poster of my elemental token that they had up in SCG for years. I was able to snag that one when they took them down.
Yeah, top right corner, you can barely see a chip of it. It's fine. All right, so let's go over the sideboards real quick while we're shuffling up. So Brad has 2 copies of Celestial Purge, 2 Dispels, 2 Rejection, 2 Surgicals. Those are going to be hot. 2 Vendilion Click, a Baneslayer, an Abrade, an Explosives, a Lyra, and a Negate. Of these, what are you most afraid of, and what do you think Brad is going to be bringing in?
Surgical, obviously, the thing I'm most afraid of. Yeah. In general, Surgical was a good card against the deck, but it wasn't good. It wasn't that good out of most decks. But Jeskai Control is specifically trying to run me out of threats, so Surgical ends up being quite good, and he has Snapcasters for it. Like he can just Surgical Phoenixes early, kill a thing, Surgical things. Surgical, Snap Surgical on a Drake that he 2-for-1s himself to kill, and suddenly I'm trying to kill him with 2 Monastery Swiftspears and some bolts. So Surgical is easily the scariest card here. Purge is pretty good. Just lets him save his paths for Drakes and things because he has more answers to Phoenix. The Angels are very scary because I really don't want to leave in Lightning Axe. I think I end up leaving in 1 because you also have Colonnade, but then the Ral becomes the second way to kill those Angels. But those are pretty scary. I think those are the only 6 cards that should come in. Not a big fan of counter spells from Brad's side. V-Click's too easy to kill. Abrade and E don't really answer my threats effectively. So those 6 cards are what I'm expecting to come in, and they're all quite good.
Alrighty. So on your side of things, you got 3 copies of Abrade, 2 Rejection, 2 Alpine Moon, 2 Anger of the Gods, 2 Dispel, 2 Surgicals, a Spell Pierce, and a Ral. Of these cards, what do you think are your most valuable sideboard cards for this matchup?
The counter spells and the Ral. The Ral gives me another win condition. It gives me an easy answer to Angels. That is also just a good card in the deck. The counter spells are easy ways for me to get aggressive in the matchup. If you can set up a turn where you bring back a couple Phoenixes and you make a big attack, and Brad's plan is to just stop that with a Cryptic Command, Dispel and Spell Pierce can blow that all up, and suddenly I get a big turn in where I'm dealing 7-10 damage. And those are pretty important. I don't remember if I brought in the surgicals. Normally not a card I like in fair matchups, but it's a free spell, which can be important.
It's got to be
And
better than
sometimes
Gutshot, right?
Yeah. And you want to bring out all the gut shots. You want to bring out at least one lightning axe. That's 4 cards for the 3 counter spells in the Row. I could potentially trim on bolts and play some surgicals and have salvage some free spells. Be able to like hit their paths can be important, or hit their cryptic commands. And sometimes just seeing their hand can be really important. Sometimes I'll see their hand is weak and then go for a big turn. Sometimes you'll see the cards that you need to play around, know that they have a verdict, don't have a verdict, things like that. So this is a matchup where surgical actually does just enough. Just because any sort of spell that helps you trigger Arclight Phoenix and things like that can be valuable. I also think I think I do bring in 1 or 2 surgicals, because I'm pretty sure I would trim on Thing in the Ice in this matchup.
Sure.
It's just not a card. It's just so hard to leverage. First one is
plus,
good.
They can kind of screw you over sometimes with Thing in the Ice and Snapcaster Mage, right? Because like you're about to transform Thing in the Ice, they go Snapcaster Mage, target Path to Exile. Your Thing in the Ice transforms. You get the Snapcaster Mage back in hand and path you. That happened to me a couple times.
Jonathan Sukenik did that to me a month after this tournament in Worcester, and it felt bad. He worked me. He worked me over in that match.
Sukenik is honestly, he's one of the best players I've ever played against. He's so good.
I didn't lose a lot of control matchups with this deck, and I got worked by Sukenik.
My record against Sukenik lifetime is like 2-4 or something, just like not good. He's great.
We used to have a running gag that I would never lose to him, and he always made some like big huge punt, because I won like 3 or 4 matches in a row against him. We didn't play that often, but he's gotten me the last few, and it's always with him playing control and him just outplaying me by a huge margin.
All right, so let's take a look at your player slide. Russ Merriam, you were on Team BCW at the time, 29 years old at the time, from Middletown, Connecticut. 23
I literally turned
open
30 the day after this tournament. This is my last day as a 29-year-old.
Nice. Did we go drinking this night when you won, or did I go home or something? I don't know.
You weren't at this tournament.
Oh, wasn't it? That's sad. Where's this at?
This is Baltimore.
Baltimore? Why was I not there?
I don't know why you didn't come, but I remember you not being there.
I might have had real life stuff going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe a wedding or something. I remember, there's always something going. If I'm not at a tournament, there was a good reason for it, probably. So
it was at the Cheesecake Factory after this tournament.
Okay.
With Kevin King. I stayed with Kevin King for this one, and he's great.
Nice. All right, so 23 open top 8s, 4 wins. Almost back-to-back one time. You had the tough finals loss to Dave Shields when you were playing Elves. Yeah.
I should have mulliganed to 5.
Yeah. 2 invitational top 8s, but let's get to the Easter eggs. Jeopardy fan, and you appeared on the show in July 2016. You want to give us a little taste of what being on Jeopardy was like while we're here?
It's super sweet. For those people who don't know, that they actually tape 5 shows in one day. So Monday through Friday of a week's worth of shows is all done in one day. Fun fact, if you track it, you will notice that more champions lose on Thursday than any other day. And that's because they do a lunch break after 3 shows.
Oh, wow.
And the post-lunch hangover kind of levels the playing field.
Okay, so that means that most of the people who do well have 3 in a row, but then they get smushed in 4.
Well, you don't always have the champions starting on a Monday. Sometimes they won Thursday and Friday the previous week, and then they show up again. So, but just that Thursday show is usually the day the champion is most vulnerable. So before you start doing the actual shows, everybody gets to walk out on the stage and they do warm-ups. So they just cycle you in. That there's 16 people there, because 15 are going to play, and they always have one alternate in case something happens. The alternate is usually somebody from the area that is qualified, so they can easily just drive. And if they don't get used, they'll come back.
Yeah. So you eat eggs for breakfast nearly every morning. I remember you and I had a lot of Waffle House breakfasts before Versus Live back in the day.
Eggs are just the best food ever, and I eat them all the time.
Now that you're a full-fledged vegetarian, I'm assuming they're a huge part of your protein intake now, right?
Definitely one of my main protein sources. I used to do a lot of just fried eggs with home fried potatoes that I like tossing in Old Bay. Just something
Ooh.
my dad used to do a lot when I was a kid. It's really good.
Old Bay
I would
rules,
encourage you all to
man.
try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Old Bay is great on potatoes. So,
All right.
yeah. So I
Lastly,
used
show
to
me
do a
that
lot of
hat.
that.
Show me that hat.
I've been doing a lot of egg sandwiches recently now with English muffins because English muffins are great. This is a Utah Jazz hat.
Yeah,
Got
weird.
it for Christmas from my mom.
Weird. Avid Utah
Oh,
Jazz fan wearing a Jazz hat in the time shift, huh?
This is what they call dark mode from their jerseys. So if you see the red to yellow gradient that the Utah State silhouette is in, they did what was called a City Edition jersey that was just that gradient. So it was very bright. It was meant to represent southern Utah, where there's actually a lot of deserts because it's next to New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada. So most people remember like the mountain jerseys that think of Utah as a cold state with all the skiing, which a lot of it is, but the southern part is very different. So they wanted to represent that part of the state. They made this very bright red gradient jersey, and they switched it up the next year and did a sort of half black, half the gradient, and called it the dark mode jersey, which has been really popular. I own two Jazz jerseys. One of them is this, this is called their statement jersey. It's just blue and gold. But I've got a Rudy Gobert one that's in the dark mode, which is also really sweet.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get to game number 2 between Brad Nelson and Ross Merriam. Did you see how well I timed that? I hit play when you're in the middle of your Utah Jazz rant, and the moment that I'm ready to transition, it goes right to it. That's perfect timing right there. So Brad's going to be on the play here for game number 2. Got kind of whooped in game 1 thanks to multiple Arclight Phoenixes coming down kind of early, and only had the one Path to Exile early. Had to bend one because he was missing land drops off the Search for Escanta. So after sideboard here, you're going to be on the draw. What kind of cards are you looking for in the early turns? Are you desperately mulliganing to anything, or is this just most of my hands are keepable because they have cantrips in them?
Just want cheap cantrips, threat or two, and early Phoenix is obviously great. The big thing here is I want to be able to set up a big turn to put Brad under a lot of pressure that I can protect with one of those counter spells. So that's what I'm looking to have, one of those counter spells in my opening hand too, and try to maybe wait till turn 4 where I go, triple spell turn and then protect, or on turn 3 if I have a Manamorphose or a Surgical, then I can do it on turn 3 with 2 1-mana spells.
So you're really not looking to Faithless Looting on 1 and pitch Arclight Phoenix, right? Because you're afraid of Surgical Extraction?
Yeah, correct. And you also just want to wait as much as possible in case you find a second Phoenix, late in the chain. You can discard that too. That'll make, Surgical will actually be less impactful then because it won't take 2 cards out of your hand.
All right. Brad cycles Hieroglyphic Illumination here. Modern
look like a
staple.
double bottom on my Serum Visions, by the way, which is a sign that I'm land light.
Usually, yeah. Sometimes it means you're land heavy, though. Brad fetches and plays Search for Escanta. Do you know how many he was playing in his list? Was it 2? Or was just the 1?
I think he has 2. It might just be 1. And I'm, again, at this point, I'm a little annoyed. You can see a Dispel in my hand. I might have, I think, if I remember correctly, I think I have the Spell Pierce too. I thought about holding up Pierce for a search, but I think I was land light and I really wanted to play the Visions to hit land drops. I do make a land drop. Looks like I have some Thought Scours. Sometimes I would like to target Brad, but with this search, I definitely can't.
Yeah, unfortunate. Because again, you don't at this point, you don't necessarily even want to put the Arclight Phoenix into your graveyard. You'd rather just cast them from hand almost.
That's definitely an option in this matchup. Mill 2 lands on the first scour. We got Manamorphose Bolt off the second. Reasonable.
All right, looks like you picked up a Faithless Looting. I don't see an Arclight Phoenix hanging out in your hand just yet. Maybe we're going to dig for one, but maybe you have one far left and I can't quite see it.
Might be a turn 3 thing, hold up counterspell kind of draw.
Well, I see a Manamorphose in hand, so you might actually be able to go Manamorphose, 2 spells, 3rd land, hold up Dispel, bring back Phoenixes with Dispel backup. That might be something kind of cool.
A 3rd land here. I could have protected this Manamorphose, and I know Brad countered one in our Swiss match.
Maybe it's a bait Manamorphose. Maybe you don't actually want to go for it yet. Or maybe he can't counter except with Logic Knot, right?
there's the second spell. I think you'll see me play a third land before looting.
Yeah, that makes sense. So looting with the red floating, we're going to draw 2 discard. Looking to pitch some Phoenixes since we got that Dispel backup. Found a Phoenix. Might have 2. Lucky, lucky.
The lucky turns are when you Thought Scour into an extra one.
That's true. That's true.
Oh.
On Magic Online, all the mechanics are automated or whatever. And so it's always fun to just like Thought Scour mid-chain, and then sometimes an extra Phoenix comes back than what you were expecting because you're just going so fast. Electrolyze from Brad. Are you thinking about Dispelling this, or do you maybe the Spell Pierce is on your mind, huh?
Yeah, the one thing that Spell Pierce can get, weak obviously as the game goes long, but it can also counter a Teferi if I'm worried about that, and I use the Dispel. It tells me that I think I'm probably going to have to use the Spell Pierce pretty aggressively after this.
Right. Well, if you play the Dispel here, that means the Spell Pierce is going to be needing to be cast on like the next turn. I kind of respect the play because the game's probably going to go a little long, and Teferi's one of the cards that if Brad answers the Phoenix, it can actually do some serious damage. Whereas Dispel, that's more of like a protect from Cryptic Command Chains, protect your Phoenix from Path to Exile. But because Brad played Electrolyze instead of Path to Exile, you have to assume he just doesn't have Path.
Also, if you look at Brad's first 3 land drops, playing a non-blue shock land and a Field of Ruin, those are signs that he's land light.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another sign that my Spell Pierce might be good for a little bit longer than it normally would be.
Brad is main phasing a Field of Ruin here. I'm wondering what he's going for because you have the Spell Pierce. So if it's like Rest in Peace or something, I don't think he has Rest in Peace in this list because he's playing Ascanta, but this is weird. Maybe he goes for a Lightning Helix. Do you think that he's going to go for that and you pierce it?
If he does, I will definitely pierce it. And that seems to be what he's doing. And I think he's just trying to fill his graveyard for the search and maybe fixes mana, but he doesn't get 3rd blue for Cryptic because he's got to set up Helix mana here. This does also set up.
Lost your audio, Ross. We're gonna pause for a sec. I don't know what happened. Maybe you got. I can hear you now. Keep talking. All right, I can hear you now.
Ross, everything good? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Discord shenanigans. All right, I'm hitting play. Actually, let me mark the time so I can tell my editor to cross it out. So we're at 102. All right.
Okay.
All right, so you're coming in here with an Arclight Phoenix, and Brad finds the path. This is an easy Spell Pierce, if you ask me. Easy Spell Pierce. Ooh, I lied.
Ooh, even easier. Izzet Charm.
Easier Izzet Charm.
I goes for another path.
Oh
that
my
one's getting
God.
pierced.
You baited. Oh my God, he baited you so hard, and you just had all of it. Literally threw 3 removal spells at the Phoenix, the last of which was a path.
If I just had it all.
Yeah, crazy.
Brad sounds like he baited himself because he should have done it main phase when I didn't have the mana up.
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. All right,
Teferi here.
Yeah, and if he untaps with the Path to Exile number 3, he already has 2 in the graveyard. This is maybe bad news, but it looks like he just untaps blue.
Blue lands. So that's a Logic Knot sign. No Helix.
Yep.
You have a Bolt here.
Yeah, I mean, if you find another Bolt, if you find another Phoenix, yeah, this is scary.
Like, do I want to deal with the Teferi, or do I just want to go for the Jugular, given how aggressively I've played this game?
Well, that's $1 million question, huh? Looks like you have a Crackling Drake in hand too, but I can't imagine that that's the play. It just walks too hard into Logic Knot.
If I'm going to try to go for the Jugular, maybe just getting his counterspell out of the way is good.
That's fair. That's fair. Plus, he might just not have it. He might just be bluffing because his hand's air. He's already played like 5 spells or whatever.
He did bin a Logic Knot.
Mm-hmm. All right,
so have it.
Crackling Drake is countered. If I were you, I'd go face. Yeah, there it is. Put you to 6. Make you have it. Now he can minus on Phoenix, but I don't think it'll be that hard to get it back since you have multiple cantrips in hand still. You have a Lightning Bolt in hand. You might just be able to burn him out, even if he's able to take full control of the game. If he doesn't find Lightning Helix, Snapcaster Mage, or like multiple counter spells, he might just be buried here.
And he's really tanking, trying to figure out what I have and how best to play around it. If he goes for the minus here, then I can still just bolt. That's the good thing. Is not generated any additional cards for himself.
Ooh. Come on, Bolt! All right. Serum Visions. Eat your heart out.
See what I just drew there for my turn?
I couldn't tell what it was, actually.
It was a Ral. Is it a Viceroy?
Ooh. So maybe this is going to end up being a Bolt the Teferi, untap, play Ral minus on the Baneslayer game, huh? Maybe the whole texture is shifted.
Pretty sure I remember how this turn plays out. Top, very scary for Brad. He might just be dead.
All right, we're digging. We're digging hard. We still have a land in hand, too.
This is also a top.
If it's top... Let's see.
It's not quite the same. It's not quite the top you might think it is. It's a fun one.
Faithless Looting.
Faithless Looting.
All right.
Whoop.
Ooh, 2 Phoenix in the yard. Love it. And that's 3 spells, so they're both going to come back.
Now, unfortunately, Baneslayer has first strike, so this is not lethal.
Yeah, unfortunate. But you could just send both at Teferi to kill Teferi and then go for Ral to kill the... Yeah, I guess you don't want to give him life. That's fair, that's fair.
Yep. So now I just use the Bolt. 3 life is better than 5. And now I've got my 1 card in hand is this Ral.
All right, Brad, going to go for another 5-drop here. It's another Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That's actually probably better for you than if it was a Lyra Dawnbringer, right?
Yeah, because it would be Lyra attack for 6.
The minus on the Teferi on a Phoenix is not even that good of a play either, right? Just because of the sheer amount of Faithless Lootings in the graveyard. Like you could just put it in there immediately.
Like, it ends up being a little like if he wants to do that in attack and start gaining life, then I just get to attack the Teferi back. If I had just 1 Phoenix, I think play minus attack is quite good, because then if I kill the Phoenix with a Bolt, it just, the Angel's just going to take over anyway.
Right. All right, so it looks like you have your sideboarded Izzet Viceroy in hand. We're going to deploy it. The answer of whether or not Brad has a counterspell is no. Does he have an answer?
I've already seen 2 Logic Knots. There's only one more in the deck.
Does he have an answer to the Izzet Phoenix? And that's it. Ross takes down the quarterfinals here against Bradley J. Nelson. The J stands.
That's how I drew it up.
For
Izzet Viceroy, there to kill Angels.
Yeah.
That's what it did.
Yeah. I mean, Angel Slayer, Izzet Viceroy. He couldn't. Is Ral the one who got blasted and who was the Planeswalker that got annihilated on War of the Spark? Like, no one died except him. Was it Ral?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Who's the greatest thief in the multiverse?
That's Dak Faden.
Dak Faden? Maybe it was Dak. Yeah, Gideon and Dak got blasted. That's right. All right, so we're going to skip the semis. It's not you. And we're going to move on to another match real quick.
You want to do this 3rd game of the semis? So Shadow is a tricky matchup here because you really need to time when you're going to be aggressive well. They also have very good answers to Thing in the Ice. They usually board a bunch of Surgicals because it's a good card in their deck anyway. And so, even when they get low on life, it can be sometimes hard to break through their stall. Their discard spells can sometimes make it just tough to return a Phoenix. If they just take away your spells, they can sometimes leave your hand a little clunky. So there's a lot of ways the games can play out, but mostly you want to force them to deal themselves a bunch of damage to get their shadows out, and then, set up one big turn where maybe you send a Bolt end step, untap, return some Phoenixes. Or you can sometimes grind them out a little bit, especially if they don't find their shadows early. If you can axe away a Gurmag Angler, leave them a little threat light, and just grind them out with Phoenixes and Drakes. Those are the 2 ways that you're really trying to play the game.
All right, so we're here for game number 3 in the semifinals. Max Medeiros on Grixis Shadow is going to be on the play. How do you feel about the matchup in general? Is this like a really tough one, or do you think like most of the time? I know it's intricate. I know there's a lot of tough decisions, but overall, do you think that you're favored?
This is one at the time. This is one I was pretty scared of, and I didn't really like to see and play against. In hindsight, I think I was a little bit overly pessimistic about it, but I think the matchup is really close.
Yeah, I mean, if they
On
just
you,
make like a 6/6 Death Shadow or whatever, it seems kind of hard to kill it.
but that means they're at 7, and so it might be easy to kill them.
Yeah, that's fair.
This is another matchup where I would be very happy to play against Grixis Shadow if I knew my opponent was inexperienced. But if I was playing against a Shadow Master, then I would feel really far behind.
A classic modern conundrum. You're favored against everything as long as they're bad.
Welcome to Magic.
All right, Serum Visions here from both players as they set up their first few draws. Medeiros going to play land number 2 and pass. Note, this is before drawing in the lock, so for 2 mana, you're going to be seeing things like Terminate.
But I'm really happy to not see any sort of discard and a pretty slow hand here. No Thought Scour into Gurmag Angler. Real disruption. Maybe he has a push and he wants to push a thing in the ice, but I'm not going to give him that opportunity. I'm just going to keep setting up my draws here.
Yeah, that's interesting. You actually drew Monastery Swiftspear for the turn, and he chose to not cast it. But the Serum Visions here are going to get snagged by an unferocious Stubborn Denial, old Stubby D.
But like I said, you don't want to deal them that little chip shot damage early.
Right.
You want to make them do it to themselves.
Yeah, and once they're at 12, then you start hammering them.
and you can do that with Swiftspear when it has haste. If you play it with 2 or 3 mana back, start casting Manamorphoses and Gut Shots and cantrips, it can become a 4 or 5 power haste creature pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure. The haste on Swiftspear was interesting, and I think that this is one of the only builds you ever played that had Swiftspear in it, or at the very least, the numbers like really dwindled after that, and the more stock versions over time became Thing in the Ice, Arclight Phoenix, and just like 2 Crackling Drakes, and sometimes people would play like a random one of something or another.
People started playing Snapcaster Mage for a time. It took a little while for people to for your opponents to realize that their graveyard hate wasn't that good. And once they stopped bringing in the graveyard hate, that's when you saw the builds with Pyromancer Ascension pop up, and that ended up being the better build. Like 2 Ascension was really good.
I remember the Ascensions were kind of clutch, and they had a lot of like little mini combos with Noxus Survival and stuff. That was really cool.
Because Gut Shot became bad because people stopped playing the Noble Hierarch decks, but you still wanted free spells, so you would like main deck a couple Surgicals for the mirror, and then have a couple Noxious Revivals. Yeah, and for Dredge.
Dredge was a huge deck at the time, and so main deck Surgical became pretty common because it was so good against Phoenix and Dredge.
So my opponent is now at 12, but hasn't found a Shadow, and they just have this 5/5, which I can potentially axe. I'm pretty happy about this start from them. They have the Stubborn Denial, which is okay. But, I got off a few cantrips. I've set up my draws well enough, and this turn is about to be spicy.
Well, if I've learned anything playing Magic, it's that counterspells are pretty trash against decks that play a bunch of 1-mana cantrips as their primary non-creature spells. And, like, I would never bring in negates or things like that against an Izzet Phoenix deck. There's just not enough relevant targets. Like, everything just does the same thing.
And, a couple Stubborn Denials for a Lightning Axe can be good. Hitting a key Faithless Looting. But yeah, in general, not particularly good here. I wouldn't be surprised if Max only had a couple in after sideboarding. Yeah, hold on to your butts, chat. This turn's going to be good.
Yeah, so the Gurmag from Max is looming, but you're going pretty fast here, so it seems like you're probably going to have a pretty big turn. Let's wait and see what happens.
Just planning everything out here.
Yeah, because the top of your deck can change what happens too with the Manamorphose, so you might not even want to play the Swiftspear. But if you can get the Swiftspear up to 5 power, oh, lordy. Looks like you're starting with it. Here's a Manamorphose. I don't think I would
play it if I couldn't, right? This either means it's going to be 5 power or I have Lightning Axe.
Yep. All right, so this makes it 3/4.
Oh, I've got 2 mana left, so that's...
Serum Visions,
Red.
4/5. Red floating.
I can already see a Phoenix in my hand.
And a Faithless Looting. So this is going to be pretty explosive here. And Max...
I'm just digging for more Phoenixes.
Yeah, Max might be in a spot where he's having to chump block with Gurmag Angler on turn 3, dude. That's sick.
Let's cast my Gurmag Angler against an empty board.
Chump block. Well, shit. All right. Draw 2 finds at least one Arclight Phoenix in hand, and then just discarding another land. So we're going to be attacking for 8. I feel like Max kind of just has to take the 8. I think chumping with the Gurmag Angler is kind of cheeks.
They have the Surgical. That's possible, but doesn't. Even that would put him at 10, staring down 5.
Yeah. All right, smashing in. If he takes this 8 damage, that means is Arclight Phoenix plus a Lightning Bolt next turn is lethal. So he has to kill Arclight Phoenix, and then maybe he still has to deal with the Swiftspear too. So this might be a fine turn to chump block, assuming that you can't play 4 spells next turn. It might be the easiest way to survive damage, but without any pressure coming back, I don't think that he can really just tread water against a Phoenix, right? You can just keep bringing it back over and over.
Reaching for the pen, so an 8.
Oh, wait.
Shot you.
2 more damage. That's 10. Do you have another gunshot? That's 11. He's at 1? Or no, is it 2?
It's 10. He's at 2. I just didn't want him to be able to play another shock land.
Love it.
So I could potentially cut him off of a mana here.
Mm-hmm. Draws
now
for
you're
the turn.
2. Got, the Angler kind of checks the Swiftspear, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
And, you don't have great removal spell answers for the Phoenix, and you've got to be wary of Lightning Bolt.
Right. So a Fatal Push here, looks like. It looks like his hand is Lightning Bolt, Fatal Push, some other white border card. Can't really tell if he has white border basics or not.
This is that game plan that I talked about where you let them deal themselves significant damage, give you a window for one big turn. And that's what I did. He, Max dealt himself 8 damage with the 3 lands. I had the window to get 10 damage in. Now suddenly he's at 2 and doesn't really have any ability to turn the corner.
Yeah.
You got to try. I do like this play for Max. Like you got to try to kill me when you're at 2.
Yep, and he's got a bolt in hand, so he can actually stop the Arclight Phoenix from coming across, but I think that you have a lethal Lightning Bolt in hand, so I think this one's kind of locked up. But we'll see if Max can get out of it. We'll see. I mean, that's a Death Shadow too. That's a huge thing. So if you don't kill him this turn, you're in trouble, but I think you just have it.
I have a bolt in hand. I might have 2.
Red. Ah, shit. Dead.
There's another Phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I've looting, and then I found another Phoenix here. Awkwardly made blue. I should have made red there. I'm just going to send the bolt upstairs, and that'll be my 3rd spell, and I have 2 Phoenixes, and, you have to tap out for Stubborn Denial to live.
Yep. That should do it. And Ross is going to take it 2-1 in the semifinals. Moving on to the finals here. Who was your finals opponent? Do you remember? We're going to see it in a second, but do you remember
Jeffrey
offhand?
Carr.
Jeffrey Carr. Playing Mono Red Phoenix. So this is the other Arclight Phoenix deck in the format. What made you choose Izzet over Mono Red? Because Mono Red existed at the time, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I believe Jerry wrote an article saying that he thought Mono Red was the best Phoenix deck. And the big thing for me was Thing in the Ice. I thought that card was just very well positioned for the metagame, and I thought the blue version was able to play different styles. It was a more versatile deck. Mono Red Phoenix deck is really very aggressive. It's sort of a burn deck, and Phoenix does give it some level of resilience along with Bedlam Reveler. So he actually won some long games in the quarterfinals or in the semifinals. I remember his match going very long. But it was only 2 games, so it still finished before mine. It's a lot more turns. So it's really me being more of the control deck here and Carr being more aggressive. But I don't really have ways to stop all his burn, so I can't be a true control deck in the matchup. What I have to do is try to play defensively enough with Thing in the Ice against his, Swiftspears and stuff, with my bolts on his Phoenixes, to buy myself enough time to turn the corner and close the game quickly. The big thing is that this deck, the Mono Red deck, doesn't have, the cantrip power to keep rebuying Phoenix. So Bolt on Phoenix is a much better play against the mono red version than the Izzet version. That's something that I'm going to have to leverage in these games.
All right, well, you are the higher seed in the Swiss. You're going to be on the play, leading off with Serum Visions, scrying 2 to the bottom. Like you said, most of the time that means you're a little light on land.
There's a subtle issue in the matchup is I'm dealing myself damage with my lands. Jeffrey isn't. And starting with a Fetch Shock is something that I really don't want to do, but is clearly necessary.
Yeah, but I mean, he's got Lava Spike in his deck, so you really want to keep your life total high.
I think I kept a 1-lander here.
Looting from Kari pitches a Phoenix and a land. There is some chance he has Manamorphose and two 1-mana spells next turn to bring it back. How afraid are you of just those really explosive early Phoenix draws from Jeffrey's deck, just because he has all that burn?
That is exactly what I'm afraid of. I want, if I get a little bit of time, I feel pretty good. But he can really put me under the gun. It's about, for me, it was about Thing in the Ice. His deck, Jeffrey's deck, is a ton of just 3 damage burn spells. It's hard for him to answer Thing. Thing can bounce his Phoenixes, at which point they're tough for him to bring back. And I can be in good shape there. So it really was about Thing in the Ice and how easily I could land it on turn 2 and transform it on turn 3. And here I don't have it. I'm just on a little Swiftspear.
Just a little guy.
Get 2 damage in.
Yeah, but you're also playing a Serum Vision, kind of sculpting for next turn. This usually signifies to me that you don't have Manamorphose yet, because if you had Manamorphose, you have the chance to potentially go explosive on turn 2 with a Looting and a Phoenix and stuff. But I think that turn 3 was really the money turn for Phoenix on the majority of time.
You called it. Morphose Spike 9 ya.
Yeah, this is a pretty impressive turn from Jeffrey Carr, and this game might be over before it even starts. We'll see if Ross can come back here.
I'm at 7. I really don't want to deal myself any more damage. I want to be able to survive 2 bolts.
Yeah, even a fetch land is pretty dangerous.
Jeff's hand here is like 2 cards at this point. There's 2 lands in play. So, like I said, bolting the Phoenix looks pretty good here.
Yeah, I mean, it would take a lot of spells to bring it back for sure. So maybe that's the play, just because it gives your Swiftspear a little bit of a boost too. Do you ever think you wait to do it after he attacks? Or is the 1 damage important enough and you think he's just going to be light on spells?
It would really depend on my hand. I would generally prefer to do it on, after he attacks. But if it looks like the 1 damage is really going to matter, then you can do it on your turn. But that's a very contextual thing. Got to judge your clock. And with Jeff being at 18, it's unlikely that the 1 damage is making an obvious difference.
Yeah, so tough Serum Visions for you here. Really trying to sculpt the next few turns. Really trying to predict what Jeffrey's going to be throwing at you. Looks like you top 1, bottom 1. A Faithless Looting. Maybe you're going to find a defensive Arclight Phoenix even. But this will pump the Monastery Swiftspear. Looks like you have at least 1 Phoenix to put in the graveyard.
Like Phoenix land.
Ooh, busted sleeve.
There's a mark on the sleeve from my shuffling it. My nails were a little bit long, and somebody noted this in the chat at the time. I should not have done that so brazenly because I was not playing with checklist cards. So now we both know that there is no Thing in the Ice on top of my deck.
Fair enough.
I don't think either.
That kind of thing happens every now and then. It's just dexterity stuff, and I don't know. I would be. Yeah, I would give you a pass if I was a judge. I'd be like, that's fine.
Both getting the information.
Yeah. All right. Well, is this I'm thinking if I should shock myself and go to 5 scenario?
I believe so.
Or you just have
Spirebluff.
You just have the perfect land. Oh, you just have to kill the Phoenix to get yours back.
Yep.
And you
just thinking about whether I want to attack with my Phoenix.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking about.
All right,
that's a 7-point attack.
Yep, and there's potentially lethal next turn. Carr, like you said, doesn't have those cantrips, so might not be able to get the Phoenix back from the graveyard this turn. Looks like he has Gutshot, Bedlam Reveler, and a land or 2. He might be all out of time.
It's a bit of a risk. Like if Carr had Manamorphose Bolt Gutshot or Manamorphose Bolt by attacking with my Phoenix, I lose a game that maybe I would have won. but it requires, I think, a pretty significant amount. It could also be a looting bolt or looting bolt gut shot. But most of his spells are burn spells, so I was figuring if he's playing 3 spells, I'm probably dying.
Well, let's see if you can kill him this turn. Looks like you don't have it. Just going to be attacking for... Well, maybe not. A bolt upstairs that's going to trigger the Swiftspear. A Manamorphose.
Some weird secret. I have a gut shot in hand, and I just wanted to make sure that I didn't want to lead with Manamorphose. That's what I was thinking about, because I didn't want Carr to be able to bolt the Swiftspear.
That's 6 sequencing.
First.
6 sequencing.
Then,
Ross takes game
Manamorphose.
1.
And if he has bolt in response to the Morphose, I can gut shot. If if he responds to the bolt, I can Manamorphose and cast more spells. But yeah, I just had 2 bolts there to finish the game off, and that's I think if you listen to the commentary, Patrick really thought that the aggression from Jeff's deck was going to take it, because I didn't really have ways to stop it, and the matchup was going to be a lot about speed. But because of my cantrips, I'm able to do just enough to disrupt him with just my normal removal spells in a lot of these games, and win games exactly like you saw. Like, that was a turn 5 kill on the play, and being on the play was really important. Let's not discount that at all. I think Jeff probably wins that game on the draw.
All right,
or on the play.
I got a surprise for you. You ready for this? Jeffrey Carr is in chat right now, and Don. He says that's him. He says he had a risk factor in hand. He was going to risk factor you end of turn. He might have had you if you didn't kill him that turn. That would have been kind of fun.
Yeah, I would imagine he would have had me with a risk factor is just draw 3 cards and that's going to probably do a lot. But
all right, let's go to the sideboards here real quick. Yeah. All right, yeah. So from Jeffrey Carr's side, we got 4 copies of Tormod Script, 3 Eidolon the Great Revel, 2 Shattering Spree, 2 Abrade, 2 Dismember, and 2 Hazoret the Fervent. What are the cards that you are afraid of, and what do you think he's going to bring in?
So Dismember is very good because it answers Thing, and as I said earlier, Thing in the Ice is the card I'm trying to rely on in this matchup. Can also answer Crackling Drake, which is reasonable in the matchup as well. Something that can play defense for a turn and then just end the game afterwards. Eidolon, also scary because it just demands an immediate bolt.
Yeah.
If I just don't have the bolt, it's probably GG. Tormod Script, that's probably the most obvious card for most people looking at this. But of the 3, it's the one I'm least worried about, because I am trying to rely more on Thing and Drake than I am on Phoenix. And if he's playing that, it's not a spell towards his game plan, not burn towards his game plan. I'm not even sure if all 4 came in, or if bringing all 4 in is even right. But it's more Eidolon and Dismember that I was worried about from my side.
All right, so from your side, we got 3 Abrade, 2 Ceremonious Rejection, 2 Alpine Moon, 2 Anger of the Gods, 2 Dispel, 2 Surgicals, a Spell Pierce, and a Route Izzet Viceroy. What do you think your most valuable sideboard cards here in this matchup?
Surgical for Phoenix to stop those really explosive draws is coming in, and that's really the only card I like that much. The thing is, I wanted to get all of my shots out, so I'm sure I brought in a 3rd card, but I'm honestly not sure if it was an Abrade for another spot removal spell for Eidolon. Was it an Anger that could potentially clean up an explosive start? Maybe a Dispel or a Spell Pierce to play some defense early. Like, I'm sure I brought in some sort of 3rd card, but I just don't know what it was. But I'm not doing much sideboarding in this matchup.
Yeah. We have some Jeffrey Carr insight from the chat. He says, it's been 3 years, but I think I boarded in the Eidolons, Dismembers, and maybe 1 to 2 Tormods. Cut risk factor, max velocity, flame jab, and maybe a gut shot. Yeah, I think cutting the gut shots is probably correct from both sides, just because they don't have targets to kill creatures. Obviously, the free spell sometimes lets you get Phoenix back more quickly, but when both players have access to anti-graveyard measures, I don't think that that's nearly as important as weathering the storm of interaction.
Jeff's gut shots are definitely better than mine too, because he's being more aggressive. So if he leaves in a couple, that's fine. I think cutting on risk factor and some of the late game cards is right. The flame jab, which I think was a really cool one for that deck, by the way. I remember seeing the list. And,
yeah, flame
really
jab.
liking that one.
I've played Life from Lone Flame Jab in Modern before. It was fun.
Honestly, I might have left in a flame jab over a gut shot, just because some of the games can turn on whether or not you can recur a Phoenix. And if you flood, flame jab lets you do it. The mana efficiency is definitely a thing too. Having those turn 2s, with or even turn 1s if you have 2 of them.
All right, we're going to be kicking off game number 2 here. Ross looks like he's taking a mulligan. Jeffrey going to be on 7. Leads with a turn 1 Faithless Looting. This is probably one of the best cards that's ever been printed, Faithless Looting. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously that moniker comes with the caveat of like not alpha cards, right? But looting is
Did you just
really
pass?
Good.
Did you just not play land?
Correct.
You mulled to 6.
6 was like literal perfect. We get a scry. If I hit a land, my hand was awesome. Well, I just took the risk.
Jeffrey's going to max punish you for that one. He has the turn 2 Arclight Phoenix and a bunch of burn. You're already down to 11. And you're going to move to discard. Moving to discard after mulliganing is always the most frustrating thing I've ever heard in my whole life. Swiftspear, Bolt, and this one's going to be over before it begins.
I'm a 3.
Classic Magic before the London mulligan.
On to game 3.
Yep. Sideboards don't really matter when you don't play a land, I guess. All right. Ross going to be here on the play for game number 3. Looks like Carr is going to be taking a mulligan himself this game. Let's scooch forward a little bit. Get rid of the commercials, yada yada. Yeah, isn't Magic so fun and great all the time?
Sometimes you got to take risks.
No, I agree. I don't think it was a bad keep necessarily. I'm not saying that, but like that there before the London mulligan, there were a lot of games. There were a lot of games that ended like that from my experience. All right, no play from Ross on 1. He's just going to wait till cantrip and end of turn. Jeffrey Carr going to deploy Monastery Swiftspear and attack for 1.
Once again, here I start on a shock land, which is not ideal.
Yeah, I think shock land's actually better than fetching because fetch shock is kind of painful, and having both colors is actually pretty good.
Notably here, I kept a 1-lander and missed off the opt-in draw step, so I cast Looting because it was the only cantrip I had in hand that saw 2 cards immediately and hit the island off the second card.
Genius
I believe this
stuff.
This is one of the very few early Faithless Lootings I ever cast with this deck, and it was incredibly important.
Yeah, I mean, that's the versatility of the card, right? It's like the same with Brainstorm. You don't cast it on turn 1 that often, but when you do and you find your land off of it, like it's so much better than the alternative.
And I discarded 2 cantrips. I didn't even have a Phoenix, but I just needed to hit a land. Fortunately, it was an island, so painless land. Now I Serum Visions to set up my draws. Ooh, top. That's good.
Yeah, that's usually a good sign for you, not so much for Jeffrey.
Here's a Manamorphose. Here I'm just praying that I don't take too much damage here. And
yeah, Manamorphose into Faithless Looting, Bolt, or Spike or something, and pitching a Phoenix would be kind of disastrous. But this is actually going to be what I would consider the fail rate of the mono-red version, because Carr here is just going to go Manamorphose, double burn spell, hit you for 9. You're down to 10, but there's no Phoenixes, and that Swiftspear is no longer that threatening.
This is a 10 ball.
Oh, excuse me.
I shocked on turn 1 that they didn't record. So I'm at 7.
All right, but you found the lightning bolt right on top, so maybe we can do some serious business here.
Left the bolt on top. I think that might be a thing in the ice.
No, that's a Phoenix and a bolt. No. You drew Phoenix and you had a bolt, so you're going to go red, play Faithless Looting, discard Phoenix, bowl your Swiftspear, attack you for at least 3, maybe even do some more stuff after that. But that's what you got rolled up.
I don't have a ton of pressure with just a Phoenix, so some sort of reload spell is something I'm scared of. Maybe time to just rip Lethal Burn.
Well, that was another downside. The Bedlam Reveler's not even online yet. He's only got 3 spells in the graveyard.
This is a pretty good turn for me. Just trying to figure out what I want to discard alongside the Phoenix. Is that another cantrip?
I don't know. Can't tell. I think you discarded Surgical, actually, because he didn't play Phoenix.
Well, no, I think that's another Looting. Oh, yeah, that is Surgical, yeah.
All right, Jeffrey Carr plays a 3rd land. Don't know that he has a ton to
7.
do.
I don't want to go into double burn range with a Surgical. Looks like his hand is just Phoenix double Mountain.
Yep.
So not a great hand there.
No, but he can cast Phoenix next turn and put some pressure on you, so.
I just play a thing in the ice. Try to get this game over.
And still not having a 3rd land, and a Bedlam Reveler for Jeffrey Carr, so this might be a squeaker. We'll see if you can play 4 spells next turn and really put a hammer on him.
Reveler's online next turn with that 5th land.
Mm-hmm.
Draw Manamorphose here. I don't
It's
know
a
if you saw
horror
that.
too. I forgot it's a horror, so Thing in the Eyes can't even bounce it. That's sick.
Yep. Drew Manamorphose here, which was incredible.
Wow.
Best possible draw, best card in the deck.
It is. Maybe top 5 cards ever made.
Now, the trick here is that you need to save looting for the last spell to transform the thing, so that when you bounce the Phoenix, you can discard it to that looting when it goes to resolve.
Love it.
That's the tricky part about this turn. And I made blue-red here when I'm pretty sure I should have made blue-blue, because that gives me 2 cantrips to play towards a red source that doesn't deal me damage, as opposed to one cantrip towards a blue source that doesn't deal me damage. This was actually a small mistake that I made. Because there's 2 blue sources are untapped that aren't red, 2 islands and 2 mountains left, because it's 3/2 total in the deck, and there's 1 island in play there. I actually draw the basic mountain here, and it punishes me. Played Thought Scour before my other cantrip, and I drew Tarn. I think I have the basic mountain off something previous, off the Manamorphose, I think.
Okay.
It's that 3rd card from the right, because I definitely drew the mountain. And now I go to play my looting, and then I realize, oh wait, I can't do that.
Yeah, you need to play your looting
and I
as your
don't have
last
another
one.
red card. I really don't want to go to 3, and that's the decision I'm thinking about here.
Well, if you do go to 3, you could just play your defensive. You could play your Arclight Phoenix in defense mode, right? Like you bounce it, it comes back, you attack for just 7 with Phoenix or with a Thing in the Ice, and then if he deploys Phoenix, you're at 3, but you have a defense mechanism.
But his deck has 12 bolts in it, and he's only played 2 of them, so I just don't want to be dead to a bolt.
I mean, I feel you. I'm just,
So I end up having to go for it, but I should have been able to be a little bit more comfortable here. If I had made blue-blue, I would have drawn the mountain and just played 2 cantrips in the mountain and looted and been fine and been at 4, which would have been a lot better. Now I'm thinking I think I've screwed this game up. I've made one small mistake here, and I'm just gonna die. But you just gotta play the game out as best you can.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear your thoughts on your lines and stuff there, because that's something whenever Magic's being played from the hand in the older formats like Modern and Legacy, you see a lot of cantripping, you see a lot of sequencing, but you don't actually have full information because you don't see the hands that well. And so here, you're talking about some really complex stuff that we just didn't know until you told us just now.
And I ended up Thought Scouring before this opt, because I thought I was going to loot afterwards, because I was just messed up in my head as to how I needed to sequence everything. And I generally should opt because it sees 2 cards towards what I need. And as it turns out, the opt would not have found the land I needed because it was 3 cards down. So my mistake actually ended up paying me off.
Yeah, a lot of people in chat are saying that you have an insane memory, and I'm inclined to agree. One person wants to know, what did you eat for lunch that day?
I probably had a convention center pretzel. Oh no, we were in Baltimore. I'm sure I had a parfait. Their parfaits are great.
All right, transform Thing in the Ice bounces both Phoenix. Yours comes back from the Faithless Looting. Attack for 7. Jeffrey Carr, if he plays a creature, it's going to probably have to be in chump block mode. Looks like he drew another land, not a lethal lightning bolt.
It's the Bedlam Reveler is hard to remove at 4 toughness. If I have 4 damage, it can just go upstairs and the Phoenix can finish him off, unless it's a lightning axe. And he's going to draw 3 cards towards recurring this Phoenix and finding lethal burn when I'm at 3. So it's Manamorphose X.
I think X is bolt, but maybe not. We'll see. All right.
I got to find a way to deal 4 extra damage.
Well, let's see if you can do it. You got a good bit of mana and a lot of cards in hand. That's the one thing about Phoenix that was always so demoralizing to play against, because there is very few times in the game where you would ever flood. Thanks to Faithless Looting, you would always be able to discard extra lands. All your cards kind of replace themselves, and your Phoenixes would be the things that would be dying to removal, and they just kept coming back. So
I'll leave on top with the Serum Visions. That's usually a good sign. Block happens. You go to 4. Play my mountain.
Bolt you.
Gutshot you.
That is Ross Merriam becomes the champion of STG Baltimore. Look at that face, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, Jeffrey,
I
I'm
kind of
sorry.
clapped in your face there,
Yeah,
Jeff.
sorry, Jeff. All right, do we want to listen to the winners interview? Is that something you care to do? 6 minutes.
It's mainly me and Nick talking about the same things I just talked about there.
Okay.
So we're kind of rehashing the same stuff. I just go over the line. And a lot of the stuff we talk a little bit about the deck. I mentioned that Manamorphose is the best card in the deck, and it's more of a thing deck. So again, just a lot of the same stuff that I've mentioned here is what we went over in that winners interview.
All right. Well, Ross, now that we have done the time shift, this comes the point in the show where you get to tell the audience what you're doing, what's your future looking like, where can they find you, what kind of content you're going to be making, etc., etc.
So I've got some things in the works. I'm just taking a little bit of time off now, for personal reasons, but I'm gonna have a Patreon that I will announce. It'll be announced before Indy. So probably a week or so from now, I'll be announcing that. And so you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Ross Hunneds, and that's where that'll get announced. Stream is coming back. I'm just Ross_Merriam on Twitch, so you can toss me a follow there in the meantime and get notified when I go live there. I'm in the process of fixing my desktop to get the stream set up all back there. So just gonna be doing some streaming, some content for the Patreon, really just content that I enjoy and want to be doing. Potentially stuff that would not have gotten published by SCG, but things that I think are really valuable. So that's really where I'm planning to be right now, Magic-wise. And everything will, the details of it will be announced, like I said, in about a week, and it'll fully launch sometime in April. So we're a little over a month, I would say, out from it, fully being realized. But you'll get to see the details of everything that's happening pretty soon.
All right. One last thing before we go. I just want to say that Jeffrey Carr is in chat, and he's been a good sport about all this. And he had some final words for what you said after you beat him. He said, Ross stood up and said, Gunshot is the best card ever printed.
I did do that.
Nothing Jeffrey could do but laugh. So
I did say exactly those words.
All right.
When you see me there in the clip, I stand up from the chair and turn around. That's what I'm saying as I'm turning around.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Time Shift. Ross Merriam, it was a pleasure. Thanks for being here, and I'm glad to have you. If you ever want to do a future one, a lot of people are clamoring for not only the Patrick Sullivan one. I know that one's going to be a good one, but also the one with the Reclamation Sage.
Yeah, I mean, the one with the Reclamation Sage, the match itself isn't that interesting up until my opponent, John Lim, makes an unbelievably big brain play towards the end of the game to almost steal the win. After even after the Rec Sage, I was in a pretty comfortable position. I just had to sit there digging towards another disenchant effect. And I actually found it exactly that turn that he makes this really big brain play that I'll save for when we eventually do the episode. And would have won the game if I had not found my disenchant that turn. So that part of it is really cool. And I it was one of those plays where I wasn't even sure what was happening until it was too late. Not that there was really much I could do because I was under a blood moon, but it was a really, really, really cool play from my opponent there. The Peace Ellie match is pretty interesting because the entire match is good.
Yeah.
All anybody's ever seen is the last 2 minutes of it.
Someone redeemed a 100k channel point redemption the other day to watch your match, and we watched it. So I've seen it recently.
The entire match is really good, and there's a lot of cool things going on in it. All three games were close, so that'll be a fun one to do just to give some additional context to it. But yeah, I'm down to do this whenever, and there's a ton of matches we could go through. The Gerard match from the top four with Bant Heroic, even that last game against Collins Mullen with that deck.
Yeah, we could do that, man. There's tons of Magic to be watched, and we can watch it together if you're interested.
The Jim Davis match from Providence, the weekend I almost back-to-backed the semifinals of the Standard Open. There's an hour-and-a-half long match of Mono Blue Devotion against Azorius Control, and It's really, really good.
I don't know if I want to watch that one. That one seems like it might take too long. All right, Ross. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode of Time Shift. I'm Tandy. Thanks for watching, everybody at home. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button at the bottom of the YouTube video. We'll see you next time for Time Shift. Have a good day.